But I wonder if, in what ways this this world that you created, how do you see it mirrored in today's world? Is there anything surprising about having it come out right now that you didn't anticipate?
Um, that is a really good question. And also it's kind of like a
I've been thinking about
frustrating,
it too, so that's why,
yeah. And it's also just frustrating because I think even before this, I think a lot of the subtext of Lakewood was there. It's about our country is on its way to a healthcare crisis. It's deeply built on inequity. And it's just becoming more and more distant. You either are rich and can afford good health insurance, so you don't even have to worry as much as someone who's like, I have health insurance, but I pay $2,000 a month. And so I think that feeling of just like desperation that is sometimes in the book, I don't feel like I'm selling the book very well in case I'm making one to someone pick it up right now, but it is true, like that feeling of desperation of like, I need to take care of my family who is sick. And like, I think about the characters and how they might be reacting to like this crisis right now. And I think most of them would be like, I need money and I'm in trouble. So it's hard to know, like if I was doing like Lakewood COVID-19, who would still be in the book and who would be at home.
Yeah, that's a really powerful question. Um, I think our books are sort of cousins in that there's so much about work and instability. And I'm wondering, like, what's the strangest thing, if there is one, that you've or someone has ever had to do for money or health insurance? Did you ever have to play the blue chip?
I didn't have to play the blue chip, but I mean, I've been working since I was 13. Um, I can't believe I was like a babysitter at 13. Like I would watch kids overnight in a trailer. And I was in charge of like 4 kids and I was 13. I I mean, it's something a lot of people have done, but now thinking about it in my 30s, I'm like, I'm so lucky none of those kids died. I'm so lucky.
I feel the same way. Thank goodness. We knew what we were doing somehow, even though we were so young.
I worked at the post office for summer so I could have enough money to go back to school. For research for this novel, I worked as a research study subject so I could learn like how to do the processes and what actually a good research study does. And it's kind of absurd to do, like mine were for contact lenses. And I would sometimes have to do like graphs to like, what blue could I see? Could I see this blue, that blue, this blue? Or like order the blues in like an order that feels right to me, which feels absurd, but it was also weirdly fun to do.
Yeah. Did you ever have an off-putting or bizarre or surreal or casually racist, or I mean any of the experiences that are in the book? Did you ever have one of those when you were doing these research studies?
Um, the research, it's one of those things where like the people who work there now are wonderful and are really good friends of mine now. Like one of them made me homemade masks and dropped them off this week.
Oh,
But before that, there was like another person in charge, and I had just a really off-putting experience where someone had to physically take contacts out of my eyes for me. Like I wasn't allowed to do it, and they were wearing like thick rubber gloves. I feel like, I'm sorry if I'm grossing anyone out because it still kind of viscerally makes me feel weird. But she just couldn't get them out, and we had to keep stopping, and my eyes were getting more and more irritated. And she just kind of like getting snappy at me, but there was nothing I could do. Like I can't fix my eyes. I Oh, that's so weird.
and that's an experience that then Kelly has in the book, that he relates to Lena, right? That's like,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's something about being poked in the eye and being told that it's for your own good that's deeply American, I think.
Yeah. That's, you could put that on the flag right now.
I'm wondering, so you grew up in a small town in
Yeah.
Michigan. Lakewood is in Michigan.
Hmm.
Um, I hear, so much about novels of Florida and the novels of the West and California. And I see Pam is in here and she
Pam?
just wrote one of those novels and even novels about New Jersey. But do you think, is there a Michigan novel? Are there writers from Michigan that are important to you? Why does this have to be set in Michigan? What is it about that state that makes it so important to this story?
I I think of Michigan, just thinking about why it has to be Michigan, is that Michigan is where a lot of the country's subtext is always made text. You can look at the Detroit riots, you can look at redlining and how it affected Metro Detroit. Betsy DeVos is from Michigan. Um, and it's a state where you can drive, like from, I lived in Ann Arbor after graduating from Michigan for close to 5 years. And it's always kind of a very strange thing to be in Ann Arbor, which always feels like the present day.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can drive an hour one way and you can see just poverty because of structural racism. You can see that a city has been destroyed essentially in some ways because people didn't want to be uncomfortable and see a Black person next door. You can go another hour and you can go to a very small town where it could feel like 25 years ago in appearance, but everybody has iPhones. And I think the other part of Michigan that I find deeply interesting is also just it's just deeply, deeply divided, also like our country. Like you can live in a state, like Ann Arbor is the most liberal place I have ever lived and will probably be the most liberal place I've ever lived. And then I grew up in a county that went very, very decisively for Donald Trump. And I think that you just see that a lot. And you have, I think that we could look a lot at Michigan and see where our country could be heading, just in terms of how divisive things are.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, that was a great answer. Um, so I wanted to ask you a little bit about horror and
Mm-hmm.
genre. And there are parts of your book that are incredibly scary. But the suspense is so well written. It's like part thriller, part it feels like a historical novel almost, and part gore, and a lot of the uncomfortable body horror that we've even, I mean, touching your eye and things like that,
Yeah.
and worse. Um, so I was wondering how genre influenced the writing of this book. Did it come to you as one specific genre, or were you trying to kind of combine a lot of different types of prose?
I I always kind of have like an immediate like tense up when I'm gonna talk about like aesthetics of fiction. Just because I feel like a lot of conversations about aesthetics and fiction are like, you have to be like me. It's kind of this rigorous, like, do as I do, and this is the true way. But I don't feel that way. But for me, realism, like, if you actually want to get real life, you do have to combine a lot of different things. It can't be static, it can't be the same tone to feel like alive and living. I think that, and I feel like you know this too, when I read temporary, like things are so slippery and fluid and anything can happen. Like that's the best part of your book, is that it's alive. I I could not have guessed anything that was going to happen in your book, and that was
Thanks.
thrilling. And it's not that I don't like fiction where I can kind of guess what's going to happen. Like, there's a pleasure in reading something and being reassured by like the beautiful patterns of it and understanding that this is also worth reading and understanding. But I didn't think I could try to write about life in any way without at least attempting to kind of bring all these different elements in, because I think it's impossible to have, even in quarantine, I think a lot of us are just on waves of emotion every day. Every day is a different genre, every hour sometimes.
I want that sticker. Every day is a different genre. I feel that so intensely right now. I think that's so brilliant, and it's almost, I mean, when mid-March hit, were you like, "Oh, my novel doesn't even feel strange at all anymore?"
Yeah, I felt like, usually it seems like when I've talked to writers who have published books before, they talk about how their book has like this long life, and sometimes what the book is about to people, it changes like based on different events or what's going on in the world. And I didn't expect that like the people who got to read early versions of Lakewood or got like galleys or very early shipping would have such a different experience reading Lakewood than people who are reading it like right now.
Hmm. So speaking of strange times and weird
Mhm.
times, there's this moment in an interview that you actually did with Pam for the Rumpus, where
Mhm.
you say that your agent asked you to lean into the parts of your book that are strange or weird
Mhm.
and to just go for it and make them weirder. And my agent told me the same thing. And I'm wondering if there's a particular spot in the book that you could point to where they said this, go here, go to this place.
There are two spots. One is one I'm not going to say
Okay.
because it's kind of spoilers.
Yeah, no spoilers.
One is, I think I can say this in a really guarded way where it will still make sense. One is a scene where something very terrible happens to someone in an office space, and it feels like a combination, watching an office episode and also something that might be very disgusting to a lot of people. And that was kind of just a spot where he was like, yes, this, like this mixture of tones, this moment. That
That's such a gift to have that encouragement to go somewhere darker or more uncomfortable rather than neutralizing that.
I mean, that's what a good agent does, though. Like, you know, they're good if they're like, I get you. This is sick. Yes, do it.
um, I wanted to ask you too about the kind of matrilineal structure of the
Mm,
book. Which is another thing that our books have in common. So maybe they're sisters. They're not even cousins, they're sisters.
yeah.
But we have this very close-knit family, a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter, and they're all just basically killing themselves to save one another. Like I kept writing in the margins, you are going to die so that everyone else can live. And is that a female thing? Is that a deeply female emotion to have, to want to like self-sacrifice, or could it have been a father or a grandfather in your book?
I'm hesitant to say it's a deeply female thing because there are these narratives about like you see it in movies, like the man who gives it all for everybody. Does I mean, I think Iron Man gets that in the last Marvel movie.
Ugh, but he's so rich. It's fine,
Yeah, I mean, peace, dude. Um, but I when I think a lot about how women are asked to be in their relationships, I think that there is a lot of pressure for women to be caregivers, to be very focused on bringing people together, to have like this kind of glue mentality. I have to hold it together for everybody. Everybody needs me. Or if they don't need me, then what is my worth? I don't, I have very mixed feelings on that because on the one hand, I think I benefit from that a lot because a lot of my female friends, like, they're the people who are like, are you okay? If I need a favor, they're like, oh yeah, definitely. But it also seems to be like the amount of pressure on women, especially during like a situation like this, to take care of everybody, to answer questions of their parents, to make sure that their parents aren't going out en masse, to take care of their kids, to just kind of like not lose it, because if they lose it, then everybody's going to lose it. They see this person losing it. That it feels really just gendered and hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, this is maybe a good segue, but there was this line in Lakewood that just destroyed me, and this is again without no spoilers, but when our narrator first, or not our narrator, excuse me, our protagonist, when she first arrives at Lakewood for these experiments, it seems like maybe they're testing memory or telepathy. It's kind of unclear what the nature of the research and the experiments are. And there's this line that's just beautiful. Friendship, family, and romance breed a telepathy that comes from kinship. And it really stuck with me. Just the way that you can sometimes know exactly what the people you love are thinking, but sometimes they're a complete mystery to you. And it also reminded me of relationships that I have with my closest readers.
Mm-hmm.
Not readers of my book, but like friends who are writers who read my work and
Yeah.
I read their work. And I was wondering, I mean, do you have any telepathic writer relationships, anyone that you can show your work to and they kind of know what you're trying to do? Or
Yeah. I mean, my closest writer relationship, even though he's a poet, is with Paul Asta, and we went through the Indiana MFA together. And I feel like there's a lot of telepathy there when we talk about our work to each other or share something. Or even just like if we're in a space, I can kind of guess like immediately if he's like vibing with what he's hearing or if he's like, oh God. And it's just really nice to have like that deep friendship. And also he's just one of the funniest writers I know. So he also really just pushes me to not be so serious.
you're also a teacher and you're an editor, and you edited this anthology that's really important to me, the Forward 21st Century Flash Fiction Anthology. And
Oh yeah.
it's so good, and I teach it all the time. And then you're an editor, a fiction editor at the Offing. And
Mm,
I'm wondering how, this is a two-part question.
okay.
How do these different roles influence your writing? Or how do they not? Maybe it's completely separate. And then also, what are you looking for right now when you read as an editor or as a teacher? Like, what are you looking for? What destroys you?
So as I'm trying to remember the first part of the question. So it's what influences me from those different roles.
Yeah, how does that impact your writing life?
Um, so way back in, oh man, 6 years ago. So 6 years ago, I started being a reader at Boulevard, and it changed my writing life. Like I felt like I could write a story, and I don't feel like any shame about what I wrote before 2014. But I didn't realize how important pacing was, how much you have to just have a world that feels already lived in for most literary fiction. I didn't realize so many things that I needed to figure out by having a more critical eye. Like, I learned how to fix my fiction by reading stories where they were both like transcendent, nothing I could have written at the time, and also Misery, which both taught me different things about how to actually be a good writer and be a good editor. And I think that for a lot of people, that if they had the time, and it's genuinely mostly a volunteer, so it has to be the time and the willingness to do it, it is something that I think can teach you much faster, especially if you don't have the time or inclination to go to a master's writing program. I think you could learn a lot just from volunteering at a lit mag for like 5 hours a week for a couple years, because if you have a good editor there, they'll also explain to you the decisions, you'll have meetings, and it's like getting like this very nice class for free. It's just your time rather than your time and your money. And I think that changed a lot of things for me. And I think that when I started to get a hint that maybe I would have some of the things I really wanted in writing, like it's embarrassing to talk about the things I wanted, but I wanted a novel. I wanted to be a novelist. I want to be a short story writer too. But I really wanted these things. But I also realized I didn't want to be alone. I wanted to have a community that looked like me and had similar life experiences. And writing it's still like most very privileged things. It's very white. You have to have a strong support system because you don't make a lot of money no matter what, unless you're very lucky. So one of the reasons why I did Forward was I got really tired of people. They would talk about how flash fiction is important. I love flash fiction. It's wonderful. It's taught me so much about writing. But it seemed like I was the only person of color that people would kind of bring up. And I would see list after list or like people talking with great enthusiasm, but it still seemed to be a form of writing that there wasn't a lot of space made. So I felt like I needed to make Forward so I could start making spaces and community for other people to just connect with each other and see Megan's not the only person who's not white writing this type of fiction. And it's kind of how I feel about the offing too, where my time is becoming harder and harder to manage. And it's hard for me to not invest now in projects where I need to help people who are usually kind of on the outside of fiction get published or have a community. It's really, really important to me. Sorry, I'm getting a little...
No, it's so interesting hearing you talk about this, Megan, because um, like flash fiction is just another thing that white people have stolen. Like it's not a European or a Western form. It's like from China. It's from Africa. It's from folktale. Like it's
from
not
everywhere.
what's that? Yes, from everywhere. And it's
Yeah.
not and I think it's just what you're doing to bring more voices into the room is amazing. Um
Yeah, I think with all art, one of the hard things is that it's really everywhere, but depending on where you live, the dominant culture gets centered and centered and centered. And then it's really hard when you start noticing that to find a way to kind of build a community back up. How do we all come back to this as equals? How do we make space? And I wish I had a good answer for that. The only answer I think I have is you have to keep trying and you have to kind of be just aware of it. And once you're aware of it, I think a lot of people want to be in that community with many other people.
so my other question related to that
Mhm.
was what are you looking for in a short story when you're editing? Like what excites you right now about fiction?
I think it's dorky, but right now, any good short story, because I haven't been able to write one in over a year. It doesn't matter the genre or the type right now. When I read a really good one, I'm like, oh, whoa, like, that's my shit. Um, I'm, oh God, I want to write a short story, but I can barely write right now.
I mean, no one is allowed to write right now. If you're writing, get out of here. It's just
But,
too
or
hard.
at least don't brag about it.
Yeah,
Keep it,
don't tell anyone.
keep it on the DL. But I think, like, for the offing, I'm really conscious of the magazine's mission, which is to bring in marginalized writers and stories. So it doesn't mean that if you're from the dominant culture that you're not going to get published in the offing, but we might be more likely to publish someone other than you. And we look at different styles of stories too, where like it's really important to me as a fiction editor that I make more spaces for experimental or non-realist fiction by people of color, just because, especially there, it's really hard to find writers who get to publish rarely and feel comfortable in that space and will have a editor of color willing to look at their work and publish them. And it's kind of like the recurring theme there. And I mean, a lot of us do. Like our staff, we're either all female identified or agender at the moment. So it also adds like a different level of conversation because we sometimes have to say, oh, you know what, we do need to publish a man now. We haven't done this in a while. We need to shift focus and gears and do this.
So refreshing though to remind yourself, we should probably throw a guy in there.
Yeah, like we want to publish everyone. We just kind of get into the same groove over and over again sometimes. All magazines do, though.
Of course. So before I have one more question, and then maybe there's some questions in the chat.
No, you've got to read too for.
Oh, right. Oh, I thought I was going to get off the hook for that.
No, I didn't remember.
um, so before all this went
Mm-hmm.
down and the world changed forever, is there another project that you're working on? Like, what will we get to read another?
Yeah, I started a second novel, which I'm hoping I'll be able to write sometime soon. But it's about witches and it's about the relationships between women, and it's about Michigan again, but mostly the Upper Peninsula. It's very weird at times, but it's exciting weird. I'm having a lot of fun writing it.
I can't wait. That sounds so good.
Thanks.
So I guess I'll read something really, really, really short and then and then we can go to the chat. So just a reminder, if you have any questions, you can just type them in the chat and we'll get to them in a second. And I'm just gonna read the first page from Temporary. This is Temporary. She has a beautiful pink face. Yeah. I have a shorthand kind of career. Short tasks, short stays, short skirts. My temp agency is an uptown pleasure dome of powder-scented women in sensible shoes. As is customary, I place my employment in their manicured hands. With trusty carpal alchemy, they knead my resume into a series of paychecks that constitute a life. The calls come on Mondays and Fridays, flanking each week with ephemeral placements. Like clockwork, like something sturdier than time, the agency allots my existence. After I prove reliably discreet and efficient, I am sent to various priority clients, personal assistant jobs, jobs assisting with personal things. There is nothing more personal than doing your job, something I read on a granola bar wrapper on my way to work. It's a sentiment strong enough on which to hang my heart and purpose. My boyfriends call these positions a great opportunity, but they're company men. They carry comedic mugs to their offices and leave them on their desks overnight, little pools of sludge staining the ceramic bottoms. In the coffee grounds, I divine their fortunes. My boyfriends will go gray at these same desks while purchasing cubicle-sized funeral plots. I worry about those poor, abandoned mugs. How sad they must feel, how lonely, left to sit in their own filth. I worry about living the life of an unwashed vessel, the mold that fissures the leftover coffee, floating like a lily pad on forgotten dregs. That's temporary. So let's turn to the chat, and we have a question from Pam. Um,
Mm-hmm.
for Megan and Hilary, both of your novels are concerned with characters who are deeply isolated in society, even when they're around other people. How has the stay-at-home situation affected how you think about isolation in your life or in your work? That's a good question.
Yeah.
You
Pam,
wanna
what is
grab
done?
that?
I think a lot of the isolation is that, one, I kind of just like being alone. So I think sometimes my natural state to write it was that. But I also think a lot of the isolation in Lakewood, it also came from how I felt sometimes growing up, because my family was one of 5 families that had Black people in it, and so there would be times where I would just suddenly be aware either someone said something or we were learning about something, or just there would be a moment where I'd just be like, I'm completely different than everybody else in this whole room or this whole hallway, or like my entire class, there was only 300 people, but I was still the only person who was not white. And I think it just kind of adds a layer of, you always feel a little separate. And I think that's just kind of ingrained into my personality now.
Yeah, I think that's so smart. I mean, there are so many ways in which we isolate each other on a daily basis, even when there's no lockdown.
Yeah.
And there have been different times in my life when I felt isolated because I just couldn't communicate with people the way that they wanted to be communicated with, or because I was like 6 sizes larger than everyone else in the room, or because I didn't, know the thing that everyone else seemed to know.
Yeah.
And it's interesting watching the world come to terms with this idea of feeling alone when we've we've all felt alone before. Um, and there's something, I mean, my
Mhm.
mom lives by herself, and she's pretty much alone in Florida. And I used to get to see her a lot. Like, she would come up here for work, and I would go
Yeah.
with her down there. And she moved down there pretty recently, but she's totally isolated now, and has been for a few years. And she's like, welcome to the party, everyone. I
Yeah.
feel like it must be so validating for people who just are feeling alone on a daily basis to now watch everyone have to grapple with this emotion that often gets pushed to the side. And loneliness is like one of those things that's contagious. People don't like it when they see it in you, and it's in all of us.
Can I say something? Because
Yeah.
I feel like you're right that people don't like to see loneliness, but I also feel like that's kind of twisted now because of social media, where
Yes.
when you post on it, it's kind of automatically admission that you're feeling lonely and you need to connect with someone briefly.
Yeah.
And it's strange how there's that push and pull now where it's just in person, it's like, this is disgusting. But if there's a screen, we're like, oh, I've got to like this, or I've got to jump on it.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting having technology
Mm-hmm.
be the delivery mechanism for loneliness, because it's almost like it's like a face mask.
Yeah.
It's like you're not gonna like die from being around it when you see it in someone else, and the fact that you're there too means that you're also part of it.
Yeah.
Guilty by association with it. So yeah, but it is fascinating watching people grapple with it in this like funny sort of, I hesitate to say popular girl kind of way, but that is what it feels like. And
Mhm.
when it's just so, in any other time in history, it's like it's so hard to see and to really feel and empathize with someone else being alone.
Yeah.
I
We've
think
got
all
another
good fiction
question.
does that. You know, like I feel like so many good narrators
Yeah.
are loners or misanthropes or just shunned or different.
I mean, it's also easier to write
Yeah.
if you've got like the person who can see everything because it can mimic the omniscient narrator. If they're so busy judging everybody else and noticing everything, it's just easier for you, like as the writer, to get in. Let me read you the next question, and then I'll answer it after you.
Sure.
Thank you for asking this one. Do you ever struggle with the pressure of needing the world to enjoy your writing? I'm a screenwriter, and the pressure often makes me overanalyze the time. Oh, I'm sorry.
Ugh.
Before I finally sit down and actually write, would love to know how you both deal with it.
Um, yeah, I don't think that, I think that feeling is always there because we're all human beings and want to be loved on some level. Even if you like push it down, yeah, of course you want people to enjoy your writing. That's only natural. Anyone who says differently is lying. I mean, it's the most amazing feeling to have someone connect with your work. And
Mm,
I think, I think writing this book in particular, I had to kind of put myself in a state of just like delusional commitment to what I was making because it's so weird and because it's kind of like formally strange. And I knew people were going to tell me that and people were going to push back on it. So I just had to say to myself, you know, even if no one connects with this, I'm connected to it. This is important to me. If it wasn't, I wouldn't have spent so many years of my life on it. And that makes it matter even if no one sees it. And some days that worked, and some days it didn't work. But I think that like you confronting your own work is the most important part of being a writer, and everything else is just publishing.
yeah, and I mean, if it also helps, I don't disagree. I think every single thing of what Hillary said. I think the other thing that helps is that sometimes the things that I'm weirdly more proud of now is the writing that couldn't get published, or I just knew to set aside because it helped me learn how to write better. Like I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of things that they just aren't good. And I know that they aren't good, but I also know now, I mean, it's easier for me on the other side to say it, but I know I had to write them so that I could actually get better. So I try to think of it as like running or piano, where sometimes you just have to do it to succeed, even though you're not always going to be in the concert hall or what are, you win the marathon. I almost forgot the word marathon right now.
Yeah, it's practice. It's
Yeah.
all, it's just training. And I'm seeing here that you said that it often makes you overanalyze a ton before you finally sit down and actually write. But like that's a part of writing. I
Yeah.
think about things so much before I actually type a single word. And I think for some people that's just part of the process. So maybe don't think of it as anxiety or pressure, but just as like pre-writing.
Yeah. I, I think you could also, I think a lot of people get hung up on writing being the actual physical act of writing, but writing is thinking, it's reading,
Mhm.
it's sometimes drawing very badly. But it's all these things that are connected to the project. Like it's sometimes easier to think of writing, it's like all of these things intertwined to make you better at it than just typing it. Yeah.
Yeah. This one's for Megan from Brianna.
Hi.
Anna is a bit of an unreliable narrator at times, just from the way the experiments mess with her perceptions. How did that affect or influence your planning for the story?
So I had to treat everything that happens in Lakewood when I was writing it as everything actually happens. It was all real. And I had to treat it that way to actually be able to write it. I don't, I'm not someone who feels like definitively like this is how it has to be. This is what I said and you have to believe it. But it's sometimes hard for me to like know that I wrote something that was purposefully supposed to feel unreliable and slippery. And also the fact that I had to like write this in a way where it would only be good to me or like feel believable if I treated it fully real. So I think that answers your question, but type again if that didn't, and I'll answer that a better way, Brianna.
Megan, that's such a beautiful answer because I we talk so much about unreliable narrators in fiction, and like I'm sure you talk about this with your students, and I know I do, and but it's like, well, but you have to believe them even if no one else does. And I think that's such
Oh.
a helpful thing to think about.
I think when you know someone's lying, there's always going to be that, like, unless the story, I guess, is deliberately about lying and what it feels like to lie and know that you're lying. I think
Mhm.
that you can sometimes get really hung up on the artifice of it all.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Let's see, Megan,
And you too.
and maybe me too. Can you talk about what it's like to write flash versus a novel? Do you have an idea about how long a piece will be when you start it? Or do you let the story come out at whatever length it seems to want to be?
Hi, Rachel. Um, what it's like to write Flash is, I guess it should say definition at first. Flash fiction is all fiction that's 1,000 words or less. And to write it well, you kind of balance storytelling and emotion with compression. And sometimes the closest analogs are poetry because you can get that same mix of storytelling and compression and voice. But this also some I'm not gonna give a whole lecture, but that's the basics.
Keep going.
Um, but what it's like to write a novel is you realize that sometimes the things that you might think are boring as a flash writer, there's delicious things in that too, where I was so used to compressing things away, where sometimes like whole scenes in an original draft would be just a sentence. And then I'd have to go through and figure out what I needed to like pull out so that the story made sense. And also what I could actually like keep building in the scene, which would be more resonant. So I think it's that balance of knowing when to go long and when to go back to compressing things is really important. And it was hard for me to learn it because I was moving over into longer fiction. Um, how do I know how long a piece will be when I start it? I don't know. I usually find out in the revision process how long something is supposed to be. And it's infuriating. Like I can know sometimes when I have an idea for like a novel because it's a very big, complicated kind of mess of an idea. But I usually find out more in revision for short stories if it's going to be flash or if it's going to be longer. I also am a much better reviser than a first drafter. So I think that's just part of my relationship to it. Hillary, what about you?
I don't know that I have anything to add to what you said, except I'm the exact opposite. I'm a really good first
Ooh,
drafter and a terrible reviser. So if I feel like I can write something in one sitting, then it's flash. And if I know that I can't, then it's not. But um, temporary is the longest thing that I've ever written, and it's pretty short as far as novels go. And I don't know that I know how to make something yet that's not super compressed, um, because it's so exciting to me that way of working. And there's a way in which parts of my novel read as flash, even though they're not standalone. I think Flash is like, it's great on its own, but it's also a really great training ground for anything else that you want to write, and just cutting away words that are not needed and really cutting to the essence of what you want to say as quickly as possible. And I think I learned a lot about that from writing very, very short, sometimes micro fiction, that I wouldn't have learned if I allowed myself to go longer or messier. But now I kind of have to learn how to do those things too, because that's important for a novel also. Like, messiness is good, messiness is fun. Um, so many big novels are so damn messy, and I look forward to being a messy writer in the future. I think we have one more question
Yeah.
from Natalie. Hi, Natalie. I've heard from a few writers about how obsession drives their writing. Does that come into play for either of you? Was there an obsession or an idea you couldn't let go of? Is there a new obsession you have that is the inspiration for your next piece of writing? I'm just gonna say yes. Yeah, totally. I'm obsessed with my next book, and I was obsessed with this one.
Oh,
Like, if
talk about your next book. You haven't talked.
oh, it's still too early. It's like,
Okay, never mind. Sorry. That
yeah,
was
no, it's not. It barely exists, but I'm like at the moment where I'm obsessed with it, and I feel like that's a really good indicator of being ready to write it and not work on anything else. Because I will procrastinate my way out of anything, but yeah, the obsession is what prevents you from procrastinating, I think.
I think I'm not I have a hard time with saying I'm obsessed because I don't really have like a standard writing routine. I'm not someone who like hits the chair every day for 3 hours. But and I have a lot of thoughts about that idea. Um God, I have a lot of thoughts about everything all the time. It's
It's a
so
pretty
annoying.
classist idea. Like, I have a lot of thoughts about that too. I don't, who has time to just, I don't know.
Yeah, I
It's
think
just,
it's classist and I think it's gendered and I think
yeah,
it's
it's just problematic on every level.
I mean more power to you if you can have that life. But
Seriously.
but I wanted to think a lot about, and I'm still in this kind of mode with my second novel, where I wanted to think about what it means to have someone have an obsession that isn't you as a child. So, like your mother, she likes you and she's engaged with you, but she clearly has her obsessions and ideas. And in my next novel, those obsessions and ideas, they take the mother on an adventure. And I wanted to write about just women going on adventures to an island like Avalon. I love the idea of Avalon, where an island only appears every 7 years. And I really wanted to just build this place that is deeply beautiful and exciting, but you can only get to it maybe one day a year. And what is that? How does that change what you think of everyday life after you go to someplace like that?
Mm. I feel like we're maybe working on similar projects again, because I've got like an Avalon thing too that, um, yeah, no, I think it's like a powerful thing to think about, in terms of time, and when is time your own, and when do you get to have time for your obsessions, and how does that work?
Hmm.
Yeah, I think, okay, well, I think if
I
there,
guess we can ask one last round. Does anybody have anything else quick? If not, Bennett's going to take us away.
Yeah, I mean, if we have any other questions, drop them in the chat. We've got some time for sure. I don't see any popping up there, but if I'm gonna do, I guess, some end of event housekeeping real quick, and if we get another one, great. If we don't, we can sign off. But we just announced actually today that we're doing curbside, and we have event titles in stock. So if you would like to pick up a copy of Temporary, or maybe you want a copy of Lakewood, maybe you want them both, We have them available in the bookstore. It was really great today. I went in to get copies of both books to hold up tonight, and they were readily sitting there. So they're waiting for you, friends. If you'd love to get them, feel free to order through the website. Curbside's available, and of course, we can ship them to you. We'd be happy to. And I'm getting a bunch of really sweet thank yous from everyone. Awesome. It sounds like some people have already read Lakewood, already read Temporary too, which is great and is really cool to hear. Do you actually, I think this could be a fun way to end. Megan, Hilary, do you have any books right now that you're like reading or just read that you would recommend to people or would suggest for, you know, your current reading? I think that could be a fun way.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Megan, you go first because I know you have yours on your desk there.
I do. I also have one more. If I can reach it. I can't reach it.
Oh, yeah, I can't reach mine.
Okay.
No
So
worries.
I'm reading Luster by Raven Leilani. It comes out in August. It is so good. And also, you could all read, she's here right now, but you can't see her. You could read Pam's book, which is How Much of These Hills is Gold. It is so good.
So good.
Please read it. It's great.
It's
so good.
Consensus. It's like, get it. How much of these hills is gold? It's so good.
So good.
I am just coming back to the world of like being able to read for fun and not for teaching. And I'm going to read Hurricane Season. I just got a copy in the mail, which came out this spring, I think, in March. And I don't know, it's in the other room, but that is what I'm excited to read next.
Awesome. Well, obviously, big thank you from Literati and obviously all of our attendees to both you, Megan, and Hilary for stopping by tonight and chatting for so long and reading. That was great. It was such a phenomenal conversation. And to all of you attendees on behalf of Literati, thank you for coming and for continuing to support us and for stopping by tonight's chat. Hopefully we'll see you all soon. If you haven't got them, try at some point to get them and check them out. Obviously, both Megan and Hilary are at work on the next one. So, you know, waiting, friends. We can't wait for the next books to come out. Otherwise, everybody have a great night and thanks for coming out. We'll see you soon, hopefully.
Thanks, everyone.